All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for everyone who is joining me today and joining all of us. So I have lots of documentation. I apologize that from time to time I'm going to read, but I took all of the questions that I got. I asked all of my partners. I wanted to get some very specific information for you. And so there are definitely things that I think are just appropriate to read, especially because it's not coming from me, let's say. There are going to be things that I'll share and I'll tell you that, just full disclosure, right? Like, I have nothing to do with insurance. I'm going to give you my experience, and then you can take it and go and do your own research, work with your own partners, things along those lines. So with that, again, apologies for this, but I think that it'll help us and help me stay on track. I'm going to start with what I think was pretty much the most important question that I got from everyone. So I'm going to go through logistics and then the travel, and then I'll get to the on-the-ground experience. And please also keep in mind, obviously I did this to support my partners. So I flew with Scenic Air Safaris, I stayed at Ol Jogi, and I stayed at Cottar's. So the answers that I'm able to give you, or the information that I can give you, is from my experience with my partners. It's not universal to every property in Kenya, but I do have a lot of information that's great about the country in general. And then I'll also say, I live in Colorado. I flew out of Denver through Chicago, through Frankfurt, into Nairobi, and then I flew out of Nairobi through Addis to Washington, back to Denver, all on Star Alliance. So again, the information that I'm giving is specific to myself in Colorado and specific to those flights and those carriers. It's going to be different for other states, other insurance companies, other flights. But I will do my best to give you as much information as possible, and then of course, ask me questions. So let's start with COVID testing. Kenya is requiring that people travel with a negative COVID test within 96 hours of their first outbound flight, not when you land in the country. So for me, in Colorado, I have Kaiser as my health insurance. I am very blessed. I am aware Kaiser in Colorado is doing complimentary COVID testing through their travel center for leisure travelers. They are processing it within 24 hours. My experience was that I went to the center on Friday at noon, had my COVID test done. I got my results back at about 8 a.m. the next morning on Saturday. My flight was at 11:45 on Monday, and I landed in Nairobi at 8:20 p.m. on Tuesday. So I know that I'm lucky. I have the ability to have a COVID test within 24 hours. To give you another specific, and this kind of will come into play later. So Johan and I leave on Saturday for Alaska, and Alaska is also requiring a COVID test. So as another example, Johan and I went to get our COVID tests yesterday at 3:30 p.m. I am jet lagged. I got my results at 4 a.m. this morning. So for us, it is easy to get COVID tests. Now, the specifics of the COVID tests. Kenya is saying, as many countries are, it has to be PCR. I called Kaiser numerous times. Is it PCR? Is it PCR? While the swab was up my nose, is this PCR? Yes, yes, yes. When I got my documentation from Kaiser, it's got the logo, it's got all of the information, negative, negative, negative. I am not a medical practitioner, so I saw this and went, great. When I got to Nairobi, they looked at it and they said, nothing on here says PCR. I actually had a very stressful time. I can appreciate what all of our clients who've never been to Africa stress about sometimes. So I'm now standing in Nairobi going, no, 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 like this is PCR. And they said, nothing on here says PCR. Well, I don't know how to read this. The reason I say that we got our test yesterday is I went back to Kaiser and I said, I need to understand this. And they looked at it, and what my test says is NAA. NAA stands for nucleic acid amplification, which is a higher umbrella test than PCR. PCR falls within NAA. NAA can test for more things than just COVID. So I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm now trying to deal with people in Kenya and to say NAA equals PCR. That's not gonna work. Can I get you to manipulate this for me so it says NAA PCR? We will work on that. So I will tell you, for your clients, you have to make sure people will get let in, but the stress on the ground for someone who doesn't know how to read medical paperwork is palpable. So I would just make sure that when tests are being done, that they're either getting a letter from their doctor, which quite frankly they should have anyway, with a signature, blue and black ink, that goes very far in Africa. Make sure that there is a letter that says NAA equals PCR. They do not have COVID. I am their doctor and I am certifying this. Now, not everyone can get a test. I understand that. There are multiple at-home kits that people can order. They're anywhere from $200 to $300. Those are being turned around within a 24 to 48 hour time period as well, but they cost money. I get that. Be specific with those as well. There are some that are saliva based and are not PCR, and then there are plenty that are PCR. I've heard of many different ones. The one that most people have had success with is Picture Genetics and the COVID consultants. So you can do at home that you're paying for. It's like a Zoom. You're gonna sit on the line with someone, show them your ID, show them that you're taking the swab, you put it in your package, you seal it up, you send it away, and you get your results. So again, my suggestion to you for your clients, just make sure that they're spending the time now to figure out how they can get a test, what that test is gonna look like, and how it's gonna work. When I was being questioned in Nairobi, they even said to me, how did your test get done? And I, at this point, think, I got this. Up one nose in the container. And they said, well, what about saliva? Because in Kenya, the COVID tests that they're doing is up and then saliva. So the fact that I didn't have both was a concern to them, even though I said, well, that's not how it's being done in the States. So that's kind of COVID testing before you go. In terms of COVID testing on the ground, if you're in Kenya, you only need to have a COVID test in country if your outbound flight requires it or your host home country requires it. So I'm a US citizen, I live in the US, we don't require anything. So I did not need to get it because of being in the US, and I was flying out on Ethiopian, they did not require it. So I myself did not have to deal with getting a test on the ground in Kenya. That said, if your guests do, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of my clients, Ol Jogi has access to a clinic in Nanyuki. Your guests can be staying with us for a handful of days, and say 2 or 3 days before their outbound flight, their morning activity will be driving to Nanyuki to get their COVID tests, and then they go back to Ol Jogi and they have their afternoon safari, they get the results and they fly out. Or guests of Ol Jogi who tend to have a higher budget, you know what, can pay to have people come on property and do it there. Cottar's has a clinic in Nairobi with a doctor who will be able to help them get an appointment beforehand. So before your guests even get to Kenya, we can set up an appointment with them to have their COVID test. The doctor can help as well with anything that they might need. It's about a 48-hour turnaround time period, and it costs about $80. If you need to get the doctor involved, it's generally about another $20. The other option for either of my properties or any of the other properties that you might be booking your clients into is that AMREF can do COVID tests. So I'm going to read now an experience that somebody shared with me. AMREF can fly to the property or meet people at a property in Nairobi. Now keep in mind, right, they're paying for this. Your clients are paying for this, but in Nairobi, we have organized testing through AMREF to be tested in conjunction with Path Care Labs. AMREF came to someone's home with a group of 10 people maximum. They were allowed to be there to have their tests taken. The feedback is that they were amazing. They came looking like aliens in every PPE possible, every test pack securely sealed and opened in front of test patients with a new set of gloves applied each time. Results were through in 48 hours, printed and soft copy, $80 per person. So if you have guests that need to have a COVID test in Kenya before leaving, we can help and make that happen. That's COVID. I'm going to go through all of this and then I'll come back and answer questions if anybody has. Insurance. So Johan and I have supplemental travel and medical insurance through Amex. And we pay for that annually. It covers pretty much everything. I have actually had to use them in Africa, and they're fantastic. I called them multiple times before I left to ensure that there were no exceptions, exemptions, or restrictions when it came to COVID. And they guaranteed me that as long as I was 150 miles away from my residence, I have up to $100,000 of emergency coverage that I can use in any way I need. So I did not feel the need to go about getting any additional health insurance or medical coverage. And I also am aware that some are just not even offering it. When I was at Cottar's, I was actually with a number of people from both the UK and Europe and Kenya. But for the people from the UK and Europe, I was told that there are a few good companies that provide insurance to cover countries where FCO or equivalents say not to travel, and one of which is High Risk Voyager. Now again, I'm not in insurance. I haven't looked into it. I know nothing about it, but that is what they were using to ensure that they had coverage. And thank you. So Johan is in the other room, but yeah, I mean, our medical insurance through Amex is very inexpensive. We've used it multiple times because of me, because I have celiac. And so I've unfortunately gotten sick in Africa a couple of times, and they're great. So that is what I will say in terms of insurance. It's possible in certain circumstances. Visa. So currently, you technically can get a visa upon arrival in Kenya. The day I was flying out, an email from another property in Kenya went out saying that you could no longer, and I'm quoting from this other email, Kenyan immigration advises all passengers requiring a visa to enter Kenya to get it online. Visa application upon arrival to Kenya will also be done online. Cash payments for visa on arrival will not be allowed. That was not my experience. I specifically wanted to get a visa upon arrival because it was the first time in 10 years and 6 times to Kenya that I've ever done it. I've always gotten any visa. And because Kenya is not allowing people from California, Texas, or Florida, I wanted to understand really, truly loopholes, quite frankly. What would that look like to get a visa? And my dad lives in New York. I have an address in New York. I mean, you know, I wanted to see if there was a way around certain things. So that's why I did a visa upon arrival. I filled out paperwork and I paid cash. Again, this could change. So I will constantly just say to you, monitor and make sure that you are following what is happening and you're giving your guests the best possible information the day of. The reason I say that is I'm going to go into one other thing and then I'm going to tell you about the problems that I had. The next thing is the health surveillance form that is required by Kenya for guests to have filled out. All of the documentation that I saw beforehand said that that needed to be filled out prior to disembarkation. So in my mind, I went, great, I can do this on my layover in Frankfurt. When I went to Denver to check in, Denver was a domestic flight to Chicago, and they did not want to check me in. I showed them my COVID test, I showed them my tickets, I showed them my itinerary, and they said to me, you can't get a visa upon arrival. I had to go online and get information and show them the website that said I can get a visa upon arrival, and then I had to show them cash that I could pay for it. Then they said to me, you haven't filled out your health surveillance form. And I said, but I can do that before I get to Kenya. And they said, no, you have to do it now. So I, again, sat there at the counter and I filled out that form right then and there. That form results in a QR code. QR codes are great for people that know them and use them and have data or are just, you know, more savvy, I'll say, than I am. Like, I'm not a QR code person. So I will suggest that you ensure that everybody fill out that form, print out that QR code, and have it on their phone prior to checking in at the airport. Also, because if we're going to get into flights later on, if you have people that are flying privately and then are going on to charter flights, sometimes they don't have the same technology for the QR code, so seeing that paperwork is going to help. So make sure that the health surveillance form is filled out, that they have an e-visa, I don't care about insurance because that's not my thing. And that the COVID test says PCR, and that there is some kind of a letter from the doctor as well with a signature. And then there will be absolutely no issues whatsoever. So I ran into issues, but I got myself out of every single one of them because I know what I'm doing. Your clients might not know what they're doing and might call you or might end up in a hiccup situation. The next thing that I'll say, and again, I'm just kind of going off of questions that came my way, so sometimes I'm talking off subject. Combining countries. Yes, it's going to be more difficult to combine countries and to create itineraries with multiple countries in them. I've spoken with many of you, I've spoken with many other people. I tend to agree that the single country itinerary is going to be, one, the way of the world for a little bit, but also just giving people more ease in their mind about, I have fewer country regulations to deal with, fewer visa regulations to deal with. What if this airport shuts down or this country shuts down? I myself am happier for myself doing a single country and knowing that all I have to deal with is that one. And so we'll get into what Kenya has done and why also then, you know, the properties that I work with are developing these stay longer packages and how there's lots of different opportunity for people to kind of travel within the country, knowing then that you're not having to keep in mind all of the different things that are changing, because things are changing still all of the time. Also, another point I have here is that even within one country for right now, it's going to be interesting to create itineraries if your guests just want to fly scheduled. Now, Johan and I work with Scenic Air Safaris, so most of what I will speak about from an experiential standpoint is scenic, but I have information on scheduled. But scheduled makes it harder to create itineraries. I worked really hard to see if I could get up to Samburu. I specifically wanted to go to Sarara, and it just was not feasible. There were no scheduled flights. There was no way I was getting up to Sarara unless I was on a charter flight, a private flight, and that's not my budget. So that did not happen. So when you are looking at creating itineraries within the country, just keep in mind, we do not have the same lift. So if your guests are specific about places that they want to go on the day and the time that they want to go, again, then we're going to start to look at charter flights until lift picks up. And that's not necessarily going to happen until there are a lot more people traveling. Okay, another thing here. I'm glad I've got my props because it keeps me at least on track. So with all of my flights, I had to, on the flight, fill out all of my paperwork. I had to fill out declaration forms of my health and the seat I was sitting in for Germany, Ethiopia, Kenya, and the United States, and not one of them was collected. That's why I still have them. So yes, the airplanes are making, I'm glad I'm making some of you laugh. I mean, I don't know. I had to fill out absolutely everything, and then not one thing was collected. So there you have that. Let's talk about the flight experience. Because what I have heard from many people and what I had questions about was kind of the same thing with me. Everyone is fine being in Africa. They trust the properties, they trust the experience. Nobody is looking forward to the long haul. They're afraid of being on planes. What is that going to look like? So the first thing is on every single one of my planes, priority boarding happened. If you're family, military, you have status, you could board whenever you wanted to. Outside of that, they boarded from the back forward in groups. We also deboarded that way, where they were very specific. Stay in your seat until we call you. Don't even get up to get your luggage. Stay in your seat. When we call your rows, then you can get up and you can leave. So I felt that the flight experience was very orderly. Everyone was wearing masks. They continued to say, please wear your masks, on the intercom. So that was reiterated. And yet there is this thing about you have to wear your mask except for when you're eating and drinking, which is just bizarre to me, but it's fine. If people are nervous about flying long haul, this is what I have to say. I felt safer on a long haul flight now than I have felt in 5 years of travel. You know why? They're empty and they're cleaner than they've ever been. And every single person getting on that flight has to show their COVID negative test before getting on the flight. So if we really want to rationalize what the experience is, because granted, someone could have gotten COVID in the 2 days between when they got their test done and when they got on the plane, I get that. The reality is I had more social distancing on the plane than I have when I go to Whole Foods. It was empty. There was nobody around me. It was orderly. Everybody was wearing masks. I felt perfectly safe. I would rather have somebody get on a long haul flight now and fly to Africa than I would have in the past 5 years if all we're going to look at is the health element of it. And they are giving hand sanitizer or wipes. They're giving masks to people who need them. The planes are clean. And again, everyone's wearing a mask. In terms of the mask, people said to me, what is it like wearing a mask for that long? So here's what I would say to that. The mask that I chose to wear on the plane is the N95 mask. And I prefer now for travel, the mask that has the nose guard, like the little clip here. And this is the reason why. When I wear it, great. But the thing is, when I'm sitting there by myself watching a movie with no one around me, I just took that off. So it's sitting on my face. I feel fine. There's no pressure on my face. It doesn't affect my ears at all. I took it off entirely while I was eating. When I was flying back from Washington to Colorado in a packed business class where every seat was taken, then I had it on. And when I wanted to eat or drink, I just took that off and put it back and took it off and put it back. But when I was on my long haul, I had it off for an hour at a time, eating dinner, having a glass of wine, having a coffee, whatever. The other thing, if you really want to go the distance with your clients, I travel with lavender oil. Not only is it a scent that I really like, but it's also something that will kill germs and is good for breaking down bacteria. Choose rose, eucalyptus, whatever is your Zen scent. Took my little scent, put it on the inside of my mask. And you know what? It's actually one of the nicest traveling experiences that I've had because I was relaxed. I slept with this on. It was comfortable. It smelled fine. And I took it off when I needed to take it off. Through the airports, everyone was wearing masks in the airports. Few people were wearing them in the lounges because there were so few people in the lounges that everyone was social distanced anyway, and they were eating or talking, and so that wasn't a thing. Again, in terms of the actual flight experience, for people that say that they're nervous to be on a plane and to leave the US, hands down 100%, I feel safer in Europe and Africa than I feel in the US. I mean, I love my country, and you know what? Sorry, but we're not doing anything. Compared to the rest of the world, it's not happening. Denver, Chicago, and Washington, almost no signage on the floor, nothing on the seats to social distance. I had to kind of go out of my way to find hand sanitizer. No one was taking my temperature. No one was asking me anything. The second you get into Europe, there are spaces on the floor throughout the entire airport of where you're supposed to stand and walk. Every single seat has markings on them as to where you can sit or not, hand sanitizer everywhere, and talking about masks and signage. And people are respecting all of that. So I felt a lot more comfortable in Europe and in Africa than I did in our airports. I mean, in Denver, I got into a packed tram with nothing on the floor, no hand sanitizer, nothing. Then someone asked me specifically about arrival in Kenya and what social distancing is like there, and if they're orderly, you know, everything that we're used to in Kenya. And I'll say the exact same thing. Kenya is taking this very seriously, very, very seriously. So mask wearing is mandatory. It is illegal to not wear your mask in public. And outside of that, when I got off of the plane to the tram, your social distancing foot marks throughout the whole tram and hand sanitizer on the tram. When we got to the airport, 4 separate rows with all of the footpaths under a big awning where you lined up and there was someone there to say, okay, now you go, now you go, now you go. So everyone was distanced, everyone was kind of abiding by those rules, and you would go and show your paperwork, your QR code, all that kind of stuff. You would get your temperature taken as well, and then you could leave. I would say from deboarding to getting to my transfer was maybe 25 minutes, and 15 minutes of that was my being questioned about my documentation. So very seamless and easy. Even people that are sitting in the back of the plane, you know, you're gonna wait a little bit longer, but it was very seamless and very easy. In Nairobi, so as I mentioned, it is mandatory. Every single person is wearing a mask. You'll see a single person in the car wearing a mask. I was in the car wearing a mask. I think I had my temperature taken 4 to 6 times in my morning in Nairobi. You cannot go into a building without them telling you to wash your hands, sanitize your hands, and take your temperature. So that happened multiple times during the morning when I was touring around with Scenic. And same thing, Kenya law is that you have to have your temperature taken daily. So guests on property are having their temperatures taken and documented daily as well. I'm gonna now look at my paperwork and kind of go through details again and make sure that I'm hitting everything. Okay, who is allowed in from the US? So as we all pretty much know at this point in time, California, Florida, and Texas is not allowed in. I had no idea how that was even possibly going to be regulated because we don't travel with driver's licenses, we travel with passports. Nobody's ever asked me for my information outside of if I've done my e-visa. This is where I am going to read. So for instance, I am working with a tour operator in Texas, with clients in Texas who are going to Ol Jogi. They have their own plane, they're flying private. And I said, you know, do you know that they're not allowed in? And we spoke to the PA, and I figured, you know, if you're flying on your own plane, you probably have multiple homes. And they do. So their plane and themselves are now basically documenting flying out of their other home in a different state. I spoke with my team on the ground and said, look, how is this even being monitored? Can people fudge? How do we, like, is this a thing? So Kenyan authorities have access to airline booking information, so a traveler's complete route is readily available, mainly for security purposes. The forms that need to be filled in can be fudged in whatever way you choose, i.e. domestic US connections, say you're flying through New York for your international flight, and whether this means the authorities at the end see you originated in New York or not, the question would be more likely whether the two are married by anyone anywhere. There is, of course, a multitude of other documentation that is required and many repeated questions that ask for your home address, your zip code, etc. One would need to consistently lie in order to not get caught out. Therefore, I would not recommend trying to buck the system. I agree with that. I don't agree with the rule that you can't get in from these 3 states. I mean, if you have to have a negative COVID test, it doesn't matter where you live or where you're coming from. And in 3 months' time, New York could be the hot spot again. So I don't agree with the rule, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and I'm not gonna tell people to try to get around it. I know an agent from California that went to Turkey for 2 weeks to quarantine before going to Kenya. People are going to look for loopholes, some will succeed, but that's what I have to say about that. Also, I'll say nobody has any idea of when they're gonna lift those 3 state regulations. So I could not get any information as to why, when, how they might change that. On property experience. So first of all, in Kenya specifically, in order to legally have opened, you have had to have gone through a rigorous process to actually get a certificate from the Ministry of Health. So working in tandem, the properties had to develop SOPs. I can tell you right now, the Cottar's SOP and the Ol Jogi SOP is about 20 pages long of detailed information. So they had to go through the SOP of exactly what they were going to do. every single staff member had to be tested for COVID before they were allowed back on property. Now, both Cottars and Ol Jogi had absolutely no instances of COVID with any of their staff. And I spoke to the staff, and the staff also told me that there were no instances of COVID within their homes or with their friends. Ol Jogi went into lockdown very, very early on and did a lot to protect their staff that all stay on property anyway. And so every single staff member has been tested before being allowed back on property. Then, after the SOPs, the Ministry of Health and Tourism goes to the properties and does a thorough walkthrough of everything. So the property has to pass through an inspection and get an issuance of the Ministry of Health COVID-19 clearance certificate, which is good for 3 months. That means after 3 months, they will all be tested again. They will have someone come out and see the property and make sure that everything is still happening the way that it is supposed to. So both of my properties have that certificate. Many of the others that are operating have that as well. They have to comply with the Kenya Tourism Travel Health and Safety protocols. Okay, so things like this. For instance, when the camps first opened at the beginning of August, there was still a ban on alcohol. You were not allowed to have alcohol in public spaces. So when I first arrived at Cottar's, all of the alcohol had been removed from the bar so that it wasn't seen in public, but I could still have something to drink in my tent. We had wine with lunch every day. Well, I had wine with lunch every day. We had, sundowner drinks. So they're serving. It's just that it needed to be a little bit more quiet because that was a law. As of yesterday, the president addressed the nation and said that now lodges and camps can serve alcohol, so that's not an issue. But the reason I say that is that there are a lot of laws on the books that properties have to abide by that then can be changed based upon your guests' preferences. So you're going to see documentation that says all staff and all guests have to wear masks. The very first booking that Cottar's had was for a multi-gen family from New York that took the villa for a week. They've all had COVID. They showed up and they were like, we're over it. We're done. Like, we've had COVID. We just want to not be in New York going through what we're going through. We're not wearing masks. Fine. I'll tell you honestly, I didn't wear a mask most of the time that I was in Kenya. I know my teams. We stayed apart. I didn't hug, which was really sad for me. So we kept our distance. But outside of that, that's why people are going to choose private properties right now, is you're not intermingling with other guests. Even at Cottar's, that's an Ol Jogi standpoint, always exclusive 100%. They are going to do what guests need and want. We have a long checklist. So again, Kenya law, no more buffets. Well, at Ol Jogi, we say, do you want a buffet? Do you want it served? Do you want to serve yourself? You're one family. You've probably been bubbled together anyway. How can we make your experience tailored to you and what you need and want it to be? At Cottar's, no group dining. We had a table over there of a honeymoon. We had a table over there of a family. We had our table together. But our table together comprised, again, of all staff that had been tested, Calvin, who's already had it, myself, who had to get tested before I got into the country. And so we sat at the table as strangers, we're not a family, not wearing our masks and sharing a family style where we were serving ourselves. They will work with your guests so that the experience is what they want it to be, knowing that the protocols are in place and we're going to start from the high mark and then we're going to work with you based upon what you want for your experience. Okay, upon arrival. So again, Kenya law. Upon arrival, all staff are wearing masks and gloves. All luggage is taken aside and sprayed and sanitized before being brought to your room with gloves on. Guests have to wash their hands. I was walked to one of the foot pedal stations where I had to wash my hands. Then I was walked to the check-in where my temperature was taken and documented. Then I went to where I had to fill in my different forms, and that was all electronic. And then they have a wand, like an infrared or a UV wand to disinfect. And that's for high touch, small areas. They did the same thing when I went bike riding, where they're disinfecting the gloves and the helmets that people are wearing. So they have everything on property necessary to thoroughly disinfect and to ensure that everything, especially high touch and in the rooms, is safe and secure. Guests receive COVID kits. So this is actually my Ol Jogi kit. I do have one for Cottars. It's just, I'm not going to show you both. So I got my little kit, and my kit came with wipes, my hand sanitizer, and my mask. So every guest at every property is going to get those to start with. And then throughout the property, you're also going to see more of the hand washing stations, the disinfectant. But again, you can change the experience. So as you know, I mean, sustainability and conservation is my lifeblood. And the single-use plastics and the single-use paper really, really bothered me. And when I got to Ol Jogi, there were no hand towels. You're not supposed to have hand towels because that's multi-use, multiple people. And I said to them, guys, it's me, or it's going to be one family. I don't want to use paper towels. Can you put towels in the loo that I'm going to be using in the main house? Yes, they can do that there because it's private. At Cottars, if you go out on safari for a full day, you want to go see the migration, a river crossing, you're driving along the Sand River, whatever it might be, the protocol is that the picnic lunches are a thing of the past. It has to be single serving. So they've already sourced biodegradable, compostable containers for anything that is not happening on property. So, kudos, because for me, like I said, the single use is going to drive me crazy. I don't think people are talking enough about the waste that is being created through this pandemic. And I understand safety is important, but so is the environment. Let me see. Oh, okay, so just another example. When I was at Ol Jogi, we left to go and have the experience with the baboon researchers. There's a troop of habituated baboons that guests love going and spending time with. So we drove off property through a town to have that experience. Coming back on the road was a Laikipia health tent. And before you crossed that barrier, that line, you had your temperature taken again. So I say that because it goes to the extent that Kenya is taking this, of making sure that they truly are testing and keeping people safe. Do guides and guests have to wear masks at all times? Yes, by law, they're supposed to. They also are supposed to have plexi separating the guide from the rest of the vehicle. So at Ol Jogi, that's not a thing because, again, it's all private. We did just get an electric vehicle, though. I'm very happy about that. It was brought to the property while I was there. We did a lot of testing of it, and so that's super cool. So we've got a new vehicle now. But at Cottars, they have the plexi separating the guide and the front seat from the rest of the vehicle. This, again, to me, is bullshit. I'm sorry, but I mean, we also have a tracker in the back, and we're not separate. Dennis, sorry, it is. It's bullshit. We don't have we have a tracker standing in the back. Guests want to sit in the front. It's half the size. This isn't a Cottars thing. This is a Kenya thing. And so I said to them, do we have to have this? And they said no. And so I was put in a vehicle that didn't have it. They are, though, offering private vehicles for every booking. For Cottars, they have a new special 4P package, and it guarantees a private vehicle, guide, and tracker for every booking. So Ol Jogi is always exclusive. Cottars, you get a private vehicle. So again, I will say it is up to your guests and their safety, their concept of safety to create the experience that they want, because they will take that away. I eventually ended up later in a vehicle that had it, and it was actually kind of nice as a windbreaker, and I stayed nice and warm. If I go back to the Cottars SOP for hygiene again, they're also implementing a system called iAuditor, which is an online checklist system that each staff member and department have to check off daily, and that the management team then goes and checks. So I will give you the information about my properties in hopes that these are possibly then questions that you ask at any other property that you decide to book, because the bar has been set high, and I think it's important to see and know that, so that, again, your guests feel safe. Quarantine on property. What if somebody gets sick? So Ol Jogi, We are a large property. We are a sole use property. We have multiple cottages. We have the owner's home. We have tents on property. We turned our entire school into a quarantine center because we serve the larger community at our clinic if needed. It was never needed. But we have the ability to quarantine someone who gets sick or who is not feeling well on property. Cottar's has taken 2 family tents out of inventory, and those are quarantine centers. They also have a school and a clinic. Not one person has needed it to date, but if your guests are at all concerned about, is there a quarantine for myself or anybody else? Yes, there is. What happens if somebody gets sick? So both of these properties also have their own private runways. Cottar's redid theirs last year. So it's actually considered like the best in the Mara. And then Ol Jogi has their own private one as well. The reason I say that is very easy for us to work with AMREF and flying doctors to get people on property to help evacuate your guests if needed. Before it gets to that though, I've spoken about both have clinics on property. I've toured them. I've met with the doctors. Cottar's has gone out of their way and they have signed up for a virtual doctor that is available to all guests complimentary. So if your guest ends up being sick or not feeling well, they go into the quarantine tent, they have a virtual meeting with a doctor to kind of get a first understanding of what might be going on. And that can be for anything, not just COVID. But basically they can get advice and then they can make decisions from there. And then of course, everyone is guaranteed or required to have their AMREF flying doctors. So again, they can be evacuated and brought back to Nairobi. And at that point in time, then something else is going to take place. But both have those protocols in place for your guests if needed. I want to speak quickly about cultural experiences because specifically, I mean, I've got a booking at Ol Jogi in October and they said, we're really interested in the cultural experiences. How is that going to look and feel? So the thing is, keep in mind, right now is the absolute best time to go to Kenya. There are so few people. You've got the entire property or the Mara or the land to yourself with few people. Call your clients that are photographers, that are diehards, that never want to be there with 1,000 other people and get them there now. It's incredible. The cultural experience is going to have to wait. The schools are closed. Kenya has just closed schools for the rest of the year. So you can't go and do the type of school tour that you might be used to. The cultural centers, the women's centers, the villages, the markets, it's just not quite honestly responsible, even of us, to want to do that. Keep in mind, these are communities that have gone out of their way to ensure their safety and to keep things under control in their countries. And we're the ones coming from a higher hotspot, traveling internationally, and now going into their world, even with a mask on. So the cultural experiences are also really not on offer right now. And I think that that's quite honestly the responsible thing to do in mass tourism. Now, I'm going to share with you an experience that I had. And the reason I'm sharing it with you is because I got some interesting information on the ground. Ignore everything that I just said. And I was invited to a Maasai elder naming ceremony. I had the opportunity one day, basically I was supposed to go and do a full day drive along the Sand River, go see a crossing, go see animals, and that's fantastic. But my thing is culture and community. That's what I love. And Calvin was invited to this community, this Maasai community. And I said to him, in your entire time in Kenya, how many times have you done this ceremony? Like not 1,000 others, but the actual elder naming, transition, honoring ceremony. And he said probably 4 or 5. And I was like, there's no way I'm missing this. So he and I drove about an hour away from Cottar's to this remote community of about 200 or 300 Maasai, and not one of them was wearing a mask. Again, I will tell you, I mean, there were times when I was like, I'm an idiot. I was wearing a mask at all times. Calvin was most times, but again, he's had COVID and he felt okay. And I spoke to a lot of the people there and I said, you know, in 5 months, has anybody in your community been sick? No. Has anybody in your community died? No. do you guys know what COVID is? And they were like, yeah, no, we know. It's like in Narok, in Nanuki, in Nairobi, in cities, yes, but in our communities, it's not yet a thing out here. So I was really very happy to have that experience, but it's not something that's going to be on offer readily for guests. But I thought it was very interesting to be able to speak to people and have them tell me in 5 months, you know, we have not changed our lives at all. And they were just carrying on. Going back to flights for a second, sorry. I had no issues transiting whatsoever through Europe. And I had no issues getting back into the US either. Everything was seamless coming home. And upon entry into the US, my temperature was not taken, my documentation was not taken, I was not told to quarantine, no one is tracking me, and Johan and I go to Alaska on Saturday. I will also just add though, so that you guys don't think that I'm totally insane. When I came home, I told Johan what I did with the Maasai community, and I said, I'm wearing a mask at home, which I did until I got my COVID results this morning, and he has been sleeping in the guest room. I mean, I am taking this very, very seriously. I just also want you to know that there are experiences and ways of being in Africa that you don't feel like you're on lockdown or you're in lockdown the way that sometimes it feels here in the States. Domestic flights throughout Kenya. I kind of spoke about the fact that at JKIA, I mean, I thought immigration customs baggage claim was seamless and easy. Everyone was abiding by social distancing. The airports were basically empty. Again, now is the absolute best time to go if people are at all concerned about crowds or even health, because there's just nobody around. If your guests are not looking to do charter flights and they are instead specifically looking at scheduled flights, there is no regulation in Kenya that says that that scheduled flights have to remove seats, have to limit the number of passengers, or have to follow the same standards, let's say, of cleaning as the charter flights are doing. So I was on one scheduled flight. There were 8 people in the plane. There was no separation between the pilots and where we were sitting. They did not clean the plane in front of me before we got on. They did ensure that everyone was wearing a surgical mask. They did take our temperature, and they did make us use hand sanitizer. And that was it. I was on a plane with strangers. And we made one stop. And as things pick up again, they're going to make more stops, and there are going to be more people, and they're going to be going on and off and on and off. And that's just the way that it is. On Scenic, because that's who Johan and I work with, and I spent a lot of time with them, they have an entirely different set of protocols. Scenic also does the repatriation flights. They work with Doctors Without Borders, the UN, the diplomats, government officials. They are operating at the absolute highest level of health and hygiene protocols. They have put up a divider between the pilot and the rest of the cabin. They have fewer seats because it's all executive grand caravans. They have a full team of people that are cleaning the planes, spraying, disinfecting, wiping down the outside, every single high-touch surface. I've documented this on social. Before and after every single person gets on and off that plane. I have, like I said, a 20-page kind of PDF of all of their standards if you would like to see them. Kenyan civil aviation has outlawed headsets and the removal of headsets from all aircraft. So if people are doing helicopter flights and they're expecting to have headsets where they can speak to people, or with Scenic, where they're used to having the headsets where they can speak, those are all out of the planes, and that is a law. So I've been working with Scenic on figuring out, can we give a packing list? Can we have people buy them? If people bring them, can we, then have them use theirs? So if you have that higher level of clientele that might be doing private charters and helicopters, think about possibly looking into them getting a headset, because as of right now, they are not in the planes. And I can give you a lot more information on Scenic if you would like. Specifically, again, if you do have guests that are flying private, even to Kenya, I have lots of information. I'm not going to take the time now to go over it, but a full page on where they can land, what that looks like. 3 different ports that they can land at, what that looks like, what an actual wing-to-wing looks like, what Jet Connect is all about, what the VIP Meet and Assist is all about, things along those lines. So that's something that I can answer if you would like. And then, you know, I would just say also, and then I'll kind of open it up to questions, is again, just the things that I've heard in talking to many of you and throughout this process is people want to stay longer in one country. They don't want to be on planes, scenic or otherwise, as often as possible, that they want to be in a private situation with the same team of people. And that's where many of the properties that I work with, and then others for sure, come into play, because you've got lots of private villas, you've got lots of private takeovers. I really do like the package that Cottar's created. It's for the stay longer. And so I'm going to touch on that for just a second, because what's nice about that is no matter how long you're staying, 7, 10, 12, 14 days or longer, it's the same team, the same vehicle, guide, tracker, chef, butler, steward. You are with the same people over a large stretch of land. And I saw the mobiles that they use. And those mobiles, I mean, I also kind of heard the list of the Uber A-list celebrity that stay in these. They use them specifically because you can get far away from the crowds. You can go off the beaten track. You can see the Rift Valley and parts of Kenya that you wouldn't necessarily see if you're staying in a lodge or a more permanent property, more permanent like the conservation camp that we have at Cottar's. That's still permanent. So being able to travel around, to stay longer, to work or do your schooling remotely. All of the properties I work with have exceptional internet. They're setting up standing desks. They're setting up different office locations. Cottar's actually has 2 truckloads of softs that are being shipped in now. They were supposed to come in earlier, but COVID shut them down. So they're doing a major refurb on the softs that'll be done by the end of the year. And again, when we look at who's going and why, if I think of what's going to happen now going into winter, I mean, we're outside, right? We're dining outside. We're, you know, seeing art outside. We're living outside. When winter comes and people have to go back into their apartment, to their home, and they're not going to be able to be outside the way that they have been in the summer or the fall, maybe their kids are still at home, they're working from home, you can absolutely go to properties in Africa, get your work done, get your school done, have an amazing experience, be outside, hike, bike, swim, balloon, helicopter, just, I think, like, live a more full life than what might very well come to some of the cities in the States when we go back into winter, and living outdoors is not a possibility anymore. So staying longer, definitely a possibility. And I think I've answered all of the questions that came my way. I'm seeing some that are coming in the chat. Ask questions, and I'll look through these and see if there's some that I need to answer. And if you want to unmute yourself and just ask me, you're also welcome to. I've got time, but I know I'm on the hour, so if anybody has to leave, thank you very much. I will be producing a full trip report. I can send you all of this information as well. So let's see what I got here. How are they determining if someone lives in? I have no idea. That's the thing. I have no idea how they are determining where people live. Now, I did speak with an agent in California who told me that her passport says California. I would like to see that, because I don't know why that is. That's where, as I was speaking about earlier, I was trying to figure out a workaround, because I don't know. I had to fill in paperwork, but quite frankly, I mean, you can lie on your paperwork. I have plenty of friends who have multiple homes, so I don't know how they're really documenting that. I know that this is like the question of the day. I'm not a good liar. People who know me very well know that, like, I can't lie. I mean, I was sweating so much talking about my COVID test, I thought I was going to pass or fail my temperature test. If people can keep a straight face and they have information to back up, I mean, here's a great, for instance, I have friends that live in Colorado and Florida. They've been in Florida for the past 2 or 3 months, but they leave for hurricane season. I mean, they've been in their home in Florida. They could just put their Colorado address. I mean, I can't get into how that's going to work. I don't know how it works, but people are going to just make their own decisions. And then as long as you can just stick with the decision that you made, I don't think that they can actually really check that, especially if you're flying out of someplace different. Does AMREF evacuate an infectious patient? Yes. We're learning that many charter companies will not, with the contagious, they need a special pod. So yes, AMREF, I believe, does have, I want to get my terminology right, but my answer is yes. My answer is yes. They have the pod thing. They've got whatever it is that is needed to get people out. I'm not going to take the time to look it up, but there is actually something that they have. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you, Katie. Are cloth masks okay, or do they need to be something? Okay, so on property, it can be a cloth mask. I mean, the masks that are being given out on property are cloth masks, and what they're using are cloth masks. If people want to look into the real specifics of how useful masks are versus buffs versus this versus that, I will tell you in the past 5 months, I have only ever used a buff. Going into town, doing my shopping, being around people, I have only ever used a buff until I got on a plane. So Johan and I have a stash of surgical masks, and we have a stash of the N95 masks, and I will wear this on a plane because this is just a higher level of security or safety. And I know I'm going to be around more people at home or on safari where social distancing and being outside is possible all the time. Yeah, cloth masks are fine if you want to even wear a mask. Yeah, Karen, I mean, I know. People are born in different places. They live in different places. I can't really understand how they think that they're going to regulate this. Yeah, I'm not saying lie. I'm not a good liar either. So, I mean, I think it's more that we have people that have multiple homes and haven't necessarily lived in a state or been in a state with a hotspot anyway. But no, I'm definitely not condoning lying. I can't do it myself. How did I manage 24 hours with it was, I mean, look, if it comes down to wearing a mask or not going to Africa, I'll wear a mask. And it's not a big, it really wasn't a big deal for me. Again, I think because you might have actually, I know who's asking the question. So again, I'll just quickly say, I prefer for the plane, the ones with the little nose guard, because quite frankly, it stays on my mask or my mouth without having to wear this around my ears all the time. So I had plenty of workarounds, and you don't wear it the entire time. You can, and it's going to be everyone's comfort level, but you can take it off when you're eating, when you're drinking. It was not a problem for me, and maybe I'm less sensitive than other people, but there was absolutely no way I was not going to Africa if it was just a matter of wearing a mask for that long. I completely agree that, yeah, it would be a lot of money to be turned away upon arrival. That's where, for instance, it comes down to your clients and what it is that they want to put at risk. The people that are changing, their home address, they have their own plane. So if they get there and they're turned around, they're going to get back on their plane and they're going to leave. Where do you find the health surveillance form? So all of the documentation that you should be getting from your DMC should have it. My trip report will have it as well. You can look for it online. It's a link. It's very easy to get. But that is something that I can definitely provide for you. The surgical masks were required on the scheduled flights. So when I got on Safari Link, I had a surgical mask underneath this mask because I don't like to walk around looking like a hospital patient. I don't want to play into the fear factor that many people are living with right now. And so I was like this, and the pilot said to me, "Do you have an actual surgical mask?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So it was on the scheduled flights where the surgical mask was specifically required of me. My necklace is from Cottar's. Okay, so that's the end of the questions that have come in. If anybody else has questions, and again, I want to just say one more time, I am not saying lie, and I am not saying to buck the system, which is why I read what my team read as well. The reality is we all have very different clients out there that are going to be asking you, what's the workaround, right? I mean, quite frankly, I've had people in the industry ask me what the workaround is. I'm not saying doing it. I had a heart attack 10 times over just trying to get ready for this trip, which is exactly why I read what I did. I'm not saying do it, but many people also say yes to their clients depending on what they want. So yeah, I mean, if anybody else has questions, I'm still here. But I think that I also answered everything. I hope that was, it seems like it was helpful. So thank you all very much for you guys taking the time today too. Please send your clients to Africa. It's ready for them. It's amazing right now.
Hi, Brooke.
Safe. Go.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi. Who's saying hi?
It's Tammy. I'm on the phone. So I do have a question that I sent to you this morning.
This morning?
Hello?
What? Remind me of what it was.
Yeah, I guess you. No, I'm going to read it to you, so
Okay.
you can answer me because I think. Okay, we have a couple book on a private jet tour. We booked at Ol Jogi, for 3 nights in the 2021 October. They want to know if they could have their own private vehicle during their stay there because they have a lot of camera equipment. So they wanted a vehicle to themselves. Now, we don't know how many people we will end up in the group, but if this couple is on it, they want their own vehicle for the two of them. And then the rest, we know how many vehicles more we need, maybe 1 or 2 more. So can you let me know how many vehicles Ol Jogi have in total, and if they are in a position to spare 1 vehicle for 2 people and their equipment?
Absolutely. So currently we've got 5 vehicles on property, 2 closed, 2 open, and the new electric vehicle. And as always, no matter what, the answer with Ol Jogi is yes. I mean, we're working right now on an event for 40 people for this year. So if we need vehicles, we get vehicles. That's not a problem. So if you have people just send us an email. We'll look at, let's put it this way. I can't guarantee that they're going to get the e-vehicle. I can't guarantee that they're going to get a certain vehicle. But if you let us know what they want, obviously, yeah, 100% over. Ol Jogi will always make happen whatever a client needs or wants. And at that point in the future, we might very well have more e-vehicles. We might have even more vehicles because we have been having a couple of these bigger party events at Ol Jogi. We're working on the one for 40. We're working on another one for like 34. Again, it's a repeat. We already had them last year. And so if we continue to get these like really big sized ones, it will just make sense for us to buy more vehicles instead of continuing to bring them on property. So I apologize that I didn't get that time. But yeah, Ol Jogi.
No problem. I got my answer. Besides, these people, we need to give them this answer so they feel okay to book on the tour. They feel, because that's one of the conditions for them to go on the tour. So now that we can guarantee them, we can give them a firm answer that yes, you too can have your own vehicle, and then we're okay.
Yeah.
For now. We don't need the specification of the vehicle right now. Okay?
Yep. Would you said
all right. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. I enjoyed the Q&A so much. There's so many information. And I'm a little just worried because our tour, the entire jet tour, is multi-country. So that's going to be, hopefully the situation improved by next year when the tour go. Otherwise, we'll have a very much difficulty with many countries involved, not just Kenya. So
yeah, I know it's definitely interesting, but I mean, I think the reality that we all live with, and what I said on one of my social posts is, I think that the word of the day is flexibility, because the reality is they're going to change. They're going to change in the States. They're going to change in Africa. They're going to change in Europe. So we're looking at
our group is not
for 2022.
Yeah, we have time to deal with the change, and the situation changed here too, so we just have to be very flexible. Well, thank you so much. It was so informative. Thank you so much for taking the time to hold this Q&A session for all of us. All right? I'll talk to you again soon.
Good. I look forward to it. Thanks, Tammy.
Bye.
Bye. Anyone else? Okay, I can't hear you. I think how are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Hi, Kay.
Okay, how are you doing? Thank you very much for your presentation. I was able to join late. I'm doing like 5 different seminars right now. So I missed the part where everybody was talking about, well, I could lie. What were you saying that they needed to do?
No. Okay, so I've had a lot of questions from people about California, Texas, and Florida, and how Kenya is regulating it, how they're checking it. There was an agent from California who was one of the first people into the country, and people were like, how is this happening? So the point was, some people are finding workarounds. I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying it is what it is. So the agent in California went to Turkey for 2 weeks before going to California as like a quarantine in a safe country. I haven't spoken to that person, so I don't know how exactly that worked out, but I was like, how are you in Kenya? And I found that out from someone. Then the other thing is I'm working with a tour operator who has a client who has their own plane. They're flying privately to Kenya. And I said to them, but you're from Texas, you're not allowed in. And they came back and they said, okay, but we've got multiple homes, so we now live in Montana, and that's where our plane is. So okay, I mean, again, I'm not saying do this, but many people and many people in the industry have said to me, how do we get around this? Because I think they, like me, agree, if you have to have a COVID test, what does it matter where you're from? I mean, I understand that California is a hot spot and Colorado is not, but you still have to have your COVID test. So no matter where you are, you still have to have your COVID test. And I also think it's just an interesting thing because, again, in January, New York could be the hot spot. So I think that the law is strange, and I don't fully understand why they're doing it that way outside of looking like they are taking protocols. So my answer was, I'm not condoning this. I will not do it. However, people are getting around it. There have been Californians in Kenya. There are Texans going to Kenya. But that's not my jam.
Yeah, I just didn't know what it was about, but I know that Kenya has that rule. I know Tanzania does not. So I didn't know that that's what they were referring to, but I get it now.
You know what I think is interesting? And I read something this morning that made me feel like Kenya put a COVID test back as a rule and regulation. At one point, they weren't requiring COVID tests. And I almost, like, for me, and I mean, I love Tanzania, but I was like, I would rather go through the struggle of getting a COVID test to go into a country that's requiring everyone entering the country to have a COVID test than to go to a country where no one has to have a COVID test. That to me seems less secure or less safe. But again, people are going to do what they want to do, and they're going to go where they want to go or where they can get into. So I was here to provide the information that I was asked to get, not necessarily the information that I agree with.
Okay. So Tanzania does require a COVID test too. So I'm going in November. So one way or the other, I'll deal with the mask. I'll deal with whatever has to be done. So.
Oh, right. So many people ask me about the mask, and I was like, God, man, like we have it so easy in life if our biggest concern is how do I wear it?
I know. It's just a concern, but I have a surgical one too. So I have that one as well that you described. And I also wear my fashionable one over it. So.
I'm not going to play into looking like a hospital patient and walking around.
Right.
Believe it. Being in Ethiopia, that was the only place, being in Addis was the place where I saw every single person going to or from Asia wearing a full hazmat suit. And I was like, oh my God, it was the strangest thing to see everyone walking around in those white, like Martian kind of stuff.
Oh my God, everybody in the airport?
No, not everyone in the airport.
Oh, in Addis.
It was a very specific portion of the population that was wearing them. Wow. I saw more face shields and more of the, hazmat suits in Addis of Asian travelers than any other airport or any other flight anywhere.
Wow. I'm not going through all that.
That's not me.
Yeah,
and
me either.
I got my COVID test. Like, I'm fine. So.
And thank you for that information. Thank you, because I'm going to have to contact the people in in Denver to get that. So thank you very much for that information.
Good. You're welcome.
Good. Thank you. So I'll let everybody ask their other questions, but I appreciate it.
It was good to see you, Kay.
You too.
Anyone else? All right, then I'm going to stop recording and say thanks again for all of your time. And I am still here if anybody has questions or needs anything.